Hello everyone, thank you for joining us for another edition of Texas Insider TV, brought to you by Speedstream. I'm Jim Cardle. He holds the oldest office in the state of Texas, created in 1836. Former Marine, a former state senator from Houston, and now Texas Land Commissioner. We're glad to be able to visit with Jerry Patterson today. Jerry, thanks for joining us.
Hey Jim, good to be here again.
We're going to get into a number of different issues, and you're right, you've been here before. We hope you'll come back. Yeah. But in particular, as they're in the special session for redistricting and have just come through our once every 2-year legislative session, you run and manage the state lands, big responsibility. Tell us generally, what do you see the mood of the state politically, and how did you all come through at the Land Commission or the Land Office?
The Land Office, right. Well,
for the session.
It was a good session for us, but it's generally we do fairly well in the session, and it's not because we do such a great job. That's part of it, but all of our revenue is constitutionally dedicated to the permanent school fund, so it's difficult for the legislature to tweak it, if you will. Okay. So we do well, and it was a good session for us. In fact, it was a good session. It's always a more collegial session when you have a little money. So it was a collegial session, and it was fun to watch.
You oversee a lot of the veterans programs, the Veteran Home Loan Land Board and so forth, but in particular, because of the budget situation you mentioned, there was tax reform, there was tax incentives. Talk about, if you would, the energy industry. You have some, unbeknownst to people, some responsibilities there that need to be
the General Land Office
covered.
Manages about 13 million acres out of 172 million acres that make up that iconic shape that we know as Texas. Of course, that 13 million, it's not all surface. 2.5 million are submerged in the Gulf of Mexico, oil and gas production and leasing revenues. We have surface acreage where we don't own the minerals. We have mineral acreage where we don't own the surface. But nonetheless, in some shape or form, 13 million acres. We're, between the Permanent University Fund, the Permanent School Fund, we're setting records in revenue. And it's primarily because the oil boom. And oil because natural gas prices are so low that it's barely economic in some cases to actually produce natural gas. But we did well. We're doing well. We're making money. And not only just the revenues that go to public education and higher education, the entire state of Texas is booming because of our oil and gas surge. And, there are other states that have mineral resources like Texas. I would submit to you California. So why is California not booming? It's because Texas is a business-friendly environment. It's because we have a predictable regulatory scheme where those who want to risk their capital know what the government's going to do for them or not do for them, and they know that ahead of time, and we don't change the rules in the middle of the game. We're booming. It's a shale plays, it's fracking, it's directional drilling, it's 3D seismic, it's multi-zone production, and that's going to continue. Yeah.
You mentioned some of the alternative types of fuel, and it occurs to me that you've also made landmark progress toward creating wind farms in the Gulf. I guess you could talk about that for a minute.
Well, we several years ago...
It's becoming important.
Yeah,
correct?
Well, several years ago we leased 125,000 acres in the Gulf of Mexico for wind power and another 125,000 for geothermal. However, we haven't produced any wind power offshore, primarily because natural gas, which is about 60% of our generation in Texas, is natural gas fired. Natural gas is so cheap, at 3.5 an MMBTU, that virtually any other type of electric generation is non-competitive. Okay. So we are natural gas driven. I suspect when natural gas prices go back up into the $5-6 range that we're going to have more offshore wind come online. But the interesting thing about wind power is that last August we avoided a rolling blackout because of the wind power installed in the Corpus Christi area. Yeah, so it was a lot of stuff going on. Yeah.
Folks, I want to get into another subject area here, and I will say thank you again to Land Commissioner Jerry Patterson from the General Land Office. Commissioner, we also have had a lot of concern in the press lately about personal security, internet privacy.
Yeah.
The Fourth Amendment, you've been a longtime protector of the Second Amendment and gun rights. Tell us what you see in overlap there, or any progress.
Well, I kind of agree with Benjamin Franklin. He said, "He that gives up their, security, or correction, gives up their liberty for a little security will get and deserve neither." There is
Yes.
liberty has a price, and a continual surveillance police state is not something that I subscribe to as being a good idea. Whether it's the Fourth Amendment, or the Fifth, or the Second Amendment that I'm most associated with as the author of Texas concealed handgun law. And of course, that discussion going on today about firearms violence, the increasing firearms violence in the United States, the problem is it's not increasing. It's dramatically decreasing. In 1993, when I passed the concealed handgun law, the firearms homicide rate in the United States was 7 per 100,000. 20 years later, it's 3.5 per 100,000. We've had a precipitous decline in firearms violence in the last 2 decades. So what's going on? You look at the Sandy Hook, the Virginia Tech, the Columbine, the Auroras. What we have is a nut job problem. We don't have a gun problem, and we need to address that.
And then when they do occur, it's covered more in the media, I guess.
Exactly. If you look at firearms violence in history, and that's a really good point, Jim. I would submit to you that the First Amendment right of freedom of the press is actually equal to or greater threat to our cause of gun violence. Folks who are kind of on the bubble and they watch this latest shooter and then the copycat shootings, we really ought to be talking about the First Amendment rather than the Second.
And if I can jump to another subject really quickly, in respect for your time, speaking of media coverage and publicity, you recently were responsible, because you take care of all Texas's treasures, not only land but maps, and the Stephen F. Austin letter, or the Travis letter, returned it to the Alamo. Tell us an update there, if
that
you would.
letter, the iconic "Victory or Death, I Shall Never Surrender" or Retreat, left on the 24th of February, 1836. It had not returned to the Alamo for 177 years. It's been in our archives. We returned it there for display during the 13 Days of Glory anniversary of the Siege of Alamo. It was the most moving thing that I've participated in a very long time. Folks stood in line for hours, 6-7 hours, people from other countries. And when they came out the back of the Alamo, they were, many of them, tearful. The message, the story of those 189 men who gave their life for liberty is evidenced in that letter. And returning that letter was just, it makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up as we speak right now.
I know there was a little concern you had to get it approved through a commission or two, that there would be danger in the transportation.
The archives,
I guess no problem.
Texas State Library Archives Commission do exactly what they're supposed to do, protect those treasures. And we had to convince them that we would secure both, whether temperature, humidity, light. We had DPS, we had Texas Rangers, we had San Antonio PD. There was nothing going to happen to that letter.
It was a secure environment.
It was a very secure environment and a very moving endeavor.
Well, congratulations on that effort. Finally, in the political realm, what I think a lot of folks are going to be seeing and hearing your name about in the immediate future. Comptroller Combs announced a couple weeks ago she's not going to run for comptroller. You are one of the couple that have declared. Tell us how the race is going, and what do you see the political challenges you're facing?
Susan Combs said she's not running for anything. And she was a rumored candidate for lieutenant governor. I am a candidate for lieutenant governor. I'm running for lieutenant governor. I've been doing this for about a year and a half. I'm not backing up. And what I've encountered around the state is folks are hungry for candidates or office holders who are straight with them, who will tell them what they believe in, tell them where they are, and then do the same thing they said they were going to do. Even if you talk to a group and you don't disagree with them, or they don't agree with, or you disagree, or they don't agree with you, they really respect folks that are straight. And I want to be the straight guy. I want to be the folks. We have iconic past lieutenant governors. One of my favorites is Alan Shivers.
Okay.
Actually, he was lieutenant governor and then governor, but he was a hero in my book because he was a Democrat who endorsed a Republican candidate for president, Dwight Eisenhower, because it was best for his state over the Tidelands controversy about submerged lands.
And it really changed that election, literally, for the Electoral College.
Exactly. Texas went with Eisenhower in 52. Our Democrat governor endorsed the Republican. We need more leaders who are going to do what's best for Texas and don't care about the political consequences, the blogs, the pundits, the editorial boards, any of that. Be straight with folks. Tell them what you're going to do.
So you have got to the filing period, I believe, opens early December. You've got 5 or 6 months. You're going to be traveling around the state.
Traveling around,
trying
Texas,
to raise the money, shaking hands.
I speak probably 2 or 3 times a day. Where will I be tomorrow? I'll be in McKinney tomorrow. It's a wonderful thing to do. You go to places in Texas that you would otherwise have never been. You know, if you grow up in Texas, you live 75, 80, 85 years, you don't have the opportunity to travel. And what I learned is there's no reason to go anywhere else. Everything's here.
Well, speaking of here, we're going to leave it here. Thanks very much for coming in to visit with us. We hope you'll come back.
I'll be back whenever you need me.
Folks, thanks for joining us and tuning in for another edition of Texas Insider TV. We appreciate Land Commissioner Jerry Patterson joining us today. Thank you, Commissioner.
Good to be here.
Be sure and join us again. Don't forget, you're either an insider or you're not. I'm Jim Cardle. Thanks for joining us.